Hello and welcome to Libero 71, the podcast about the least important of the most important things, as Portugal's greatest living export, Nelly Furtado, once said. Thanks so much for joining us, and remember, if you like what we do, you can help us keep this show on the road. We are 7 middle-aged men launching a full-scale assault on the algorithm, and we need you as cannon fodder. That means likes, it means subscribing, it means ratings, comments, reviews. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And you should also tell all of your friends. Today's subject is 40-year-old tantrum thrower Cristiano Ronaldo. But first, I'm joined by people I'm going to refer to throughout this episode as João Fermental and Thiago Castelo da Buzina to discuss what has been a great few days of football and leaving us facing the unerring possibility, the upsetting possibility that Miguel Delaney was right about something. This is a really good week of football, isn't it, James?
It is. Miguel Delaney became Michael O'Delaney over the weekend. I think we all commented on how he'd never appeared this Irish before, but it was a great moment in Budapest. Troy Parrott's hat-trick, the winner so late, and his interview afterwards where he said, "I just love where I'm from," which, you don't hear such a simple sentiment expressed so sweetly, really, very often. And again, I think Miguel was talking in our WhatsApp group about Kevin Doyle, who must have been doing this for one of the broadcasters, saying how his kids are obsessed by Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. Ronaldo got sent off against Ireland before that Ireland-Hungary game. And for Kevin Doyle's kids, it was kind of like, oh, wow, there's a world outside of these two massive, magnetic forces that we keep telling ourselves, kids today, the younger generations, follow those players rather than teams, rather than their national teams. And yet in that one day of Ireland doing what they did, it was like, actually, maybe I should be like Troy Parrott and sort of love where I'm from.
I think we can all agree that international football is mainly just about Kevin Doyle's kids. That's what we're all in it for. John, outside of the Irish, and as you say, we've had a lot of Miguel being very happy, and deservedly so, on various WhatsApp groups. Anything that stands out to you from the first 5 or 6 days of the international break?
It's funny, actually, isn't it, that Troy Parrott says, "I'm so proud of being where I'm from," and yet when Leah Williamson said, I love being English after the Lionesses won the Euros, there was a bit of criticism came away. It's funny that, isn't it? Certain nationalities are able to have a pride, and yet those of us that are English are not allowed to be proud of being English. Now, I'm not going to go down
Which is why we've all switched our identity to Portuguese for this.
This is why I'm now Portuguese, yes.
Obrigado. Obrigado.
That's the only word I know in Portuguese, by the way. It got me around Brazil 12 years ago, whatever, so that's all you needed. Obrigado.
Remember when Fabio Capello said he only needed 50 words of English to...
That didn't work out.
Interesting fact, actually, the average dog has a vocabulary of 50 words, I think. And that's true. Okay. So Capello just taking the dog's approach to English. That's fine.
Well, beyond England and the latest Jude Bellingham Farrago, concocted or not, you decide. I actually did watch James's adopted country, against Norway.
I love where I'm from.
Yeah, you love where I'm from. Yeah. Watching Hull City. No, it wasn't Hull City. It was watching Italy against Norway, and it started so well. Esposito scoring, and who was it picked the ball out of the net to run back to the halfway line to score the other 8 goals that they needed, which didn't happen because an aside that I've made elsewhere is that, I'm sorry to say this, Norway have got better players in Italy now, and it is so odd, and I know it's been a long time coming, it is so odd when you've considered Italy as the princes of football to see that Norway actually have, and we're talking Haaland, who may well be the successor to the cult of Ronaldo and Messi, but he basically appeared in the game for a few minutes, smashed in 2 goals, job done, see you later. Incredible.
The best thing about this was Haaland was pretty anonymous in the first half. And then he said that one of Italy's centre-backs, Gianluca Mancini, basically touched his bum, just like sort of, I don't know whether he he spanked him or sort of
Caressed.
pinched him. But apparently that just, Haaland said afterwards on Norwegian TV that was it. He was like, fuck these guys, and scored twice. And I think Haaland's actually a pretty good segue into what we're going to talk about. Because, I mean, his qualifying numbers, 16 goals in 8 qualifiers, that is Ronaldo-esque. And Rory, I think you wrote, didn't you, for The Observer the other week about off the back of Haaland's first YouTube documentary about, and a lot of that is sort of quite Ronaldo in terms of my raw milk tomahawk steak, red light life.
I hesitate to say that Erling Haaland's got a red light life. I think that feels like it might be two separate things.
I'm not suggesting that.
No.
You know.
You mean in terms of like health-giving properties, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, which is why they do it in other settings
Which
as well.
Which is why Marcus Llorente, the Atletico guy.
Oh, yeah, he's got the glasses, yeah.
He wears, 2 tones of glasses. The lenses are different depending on the time of day. And has thoughts about chemtrails as well, which we'll get onto in another podcast.
Yeah, we 100% should get onto a podcast of footballers and conspiracy theories. But the Marcus Llorente I hadn't intended to talk about, but I did read an interview with him, I think in AS, about the glasses.
Did he get pinched there as well?
The quotes were pinched, very good. And he was talking about them, and like all people who were into that stuff, the initial thing was, I'm an athlete, I might as well take any edge I can. I believe, or I've been told that this cuts out blue light or something. I can't remember the exact logic.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's a good little sort of mini interview. Let's read about Marcus Llorente's experiences now under Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid. And it went on for like 1,000 more words of Marcus Llorente explaining the light thing. And at that point you thought, it's a miracle this guy's not been sold, because all of his teammates must hate him. Just here comes Marcos. He's going to tell us about the glasses again. It's going to be really boring. He's into the light thing with glasses. I don't know. They look quite cool. He's quite handsome, Marcos Llorente. He was wearing them at Anfield when he came through the mix zone after the Liverpool game, which is what piqued my interest. Haaland and the YouTube thing, it is a Ronaldo play to an extent, as Ronaldo's obviously done the same thing. I think he set up his own YouTube channel last year, maybe the year before. I get a bit confused.
He has 77 million more subscribers on YouTube than we do.
That is a target. That's fine. Smash that like button. The thing with Haaland is that I think it's playful. I think there's a playfulness to Erling Haaland that is absent with Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think that, or feels absent. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's to do with our own prejudices, our own perception. But yeah, Thiago over here has brought us on to the subject of today, which is Cristiano Ronaldo, who has had an interesting week, John. Portugal qualified for the World Cup. Well done, everybody. I think that will be his 6th. But he got sent off for kind of throwing a tantrum against Ireland, which was a little bit unbecoming of a sports person of his exalted status.
I think it was the 12th sending off of his career, but I suppose if your career is that long, that's, his behaviour was very bad, and though he tried to blame it on Heimir Hallgrimsson's gaming the referee, it was not an act becoming of a national figure, an example to all. A lot of the young kids that will have gone to that stadium in Dublin will have wanted to see Ronaldo.
Kevin Doyle's kids.
Yeah, Kevin Doyle's kids. Well, yeah, I mean...
Won't someone think of Kevin Doyle's kids?
Some of my nephews saw Ronaldo play in a friendly game over in Portugal while they're on holiday. I was delighted to catch sight of this amazing historic figure, which is what he is these days. But I suppose that's the whole point, isn't it? He's a historic figure rather than... it reminds me of the time when I went to Macclesfield Leisure Centre in 1993 and I saw Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks wrestling way after the fame. And that's almost what you're getting, isn't it? The hype has gone. You're still a household name, but you've gone to seed. The Big Daddy splash was not what it was, let's put it that way. And that's the same as Ronaldo.
But the thing is, John, you're quite right. And I think to all of us, as we say this, and to a lot of people listening, if not to all of his 77 million YouTube followers, like Ronaldo does feel like a historic figure now. And we're going to talk about what it is that keeps him going and what it is that keeps him in that Portugal team. But we're presuming he's in the World Cup squad next summer. He'll be 41. I think that red card means he might miss the first 2 games, but Roberto Martinez presumably will still include him. So we are going to get a 6th World Cup out of Cristiano Ronaldo.
and Messi. So they're two of them inextricably linked. They will become the first players to play 6 World Cups. Modric might have done had Croatia qualified for 2010, but they lost out to England. But yeah, but I suppose we're in the era of players that can play almost forever, but we're also seeing that playing almost forever has the possible end result or byproducts is that it affects what came before, because it is fair to say that if we look at it from an English point of view, the only time in the last, until Haaland maybe, in the last 25, 30 years that English football has had the best player in the world was when Ronaldo was playing for Manchester United in the 2007-8 season. That's the only time, I would say. But that's a long time ago, and he's still knocking around.
Can either of you make a case for Ronaldo being in the Portugal team or squad on a sporting level? Is that a thing that either of you are capable of?
Yes. I think this has become quite a zig opinion in a zag world. If anyone watched The Big Breakfast in the 90s, they will be familiar with zig and zag. I'm going to play zig in this scenario. Find me another Portuguese striker. Yeah, Gonzalo Ramos does not count. Gonzalo Ramos.
You can't do that. You can't be like, find me another striker, but not that one. You can't do that.
Okay, so Gonzalo Ramos, 24 years old. PSG paid Benfica 65 million for him because Luis Campos looked at him and thought, "You're my next big guy." And he can't get in the PSG team. Admittedly, it's a PSG team that's won the treble, but it's a PSG team that kind of made space for him, you could argue. Or if you're the competitive animal within Gonzalo Ramos, you're like, that dude, Kylian Mbappe, he decided to go to Real Madrid. This is my time now. And instead, PSG just play a load of non-strikers up front and have done that very successfully. You then look around Portugal, Benfica have got the big Greek Pavlidis up front. Porto have got Samu, the Spanish kid up front. Sporting replaced the Swede Gyökeres with the Colombian Luis Suarez, because every South American country has a Luis Suarez. Even Wolves have a Norwegian up front. Wolves, who are this kind of proxy state of Portugal in the Black Country. Yeah, not even they can find a Portuguese striker for their struggling team, and one that could maybe rival Cristiano Ronaldo for the striker position with Portugal. And to be fair, if you're Roberto Martinez and you take that job and you're sensible and you think, I've got to move this guy on, but then he kind of just cleans up in qualifying. Even in this qualifying campaign, 5 goals in 7, and in every qualifying campaign, he's kind of getting between 8 to 12 goals. So yes, in abstract, absolutely, Portugal should not be so dependent on a guy who's 40 going into his 6th World Cup, and having sat through some of their games in person at the Euros the summer before last, you can completely see a case for not playing him. But I then ask, if you've got a fox in the box poacher who can score you 25 goals a season at club level and in qualifying, then if there's no one else around, you are going to still take him.
If Troy Parrott was Portuguese, he'd be in the team, wouldn't he? I mean, it's true. But the point is, I suppose, that Portuguese football is brilliant at turning out defenders, great wing backs, great centre midfielders, great wingers, pretty good at goalkeepers, centre forwards. It's always been a blank spot, hasn't it? You go back to the dear old Pauletta, Nuno Gomes, and all these players, and they were playing with brilliant footballers like Rui Costa and Luis Figo and the young Ronaldo, and then they'd have, someone that the equivalent of Darius Henderson up front. I mean, it was just like they never could nail the centre forward spot. And Ronaldo, in converting to become a centre forward after he actually did fill a hole for his country for a long time, and actually there was a point a few years ago and it looked like this was the end. But actually, as James said, he sort of got a bit better. I mean, there was you mentioned Ireland, he's got a great header against Ireland 2 or 3 years ago that it's like no other player in the game can really do that. He remains there's something there, but he is essentially, a medieval catapult that has to be moved into the spot and, and loaded up, and he can still do it. It reminds me of Alan Shearer towards the end of his career would be essentially sort of manoeuvred there. Bellamy would do his running for him, and it's just like, there's the ball, Alan. Just swing that leg, those huge thighs, and then goal. And Ronaldo's much older than that. Shearer's retired at 35 or whatever, and it's like, it's not workable, but it sort of works in the world of qualifying. But when you get to the tournament, and when you see him struggle, as he can do, and he relies on moments like big free kicks. There was one against Spain back in 2018. There are those moments where you see the guy that used to be there and the presence of mind that he still possesses, but the downside is still great. And in Roberto Martinez, you're not a guy that's going to play the political game, are you? He's going to play the game that is going to say, okay, I'll make do and mend. I'll see what I can do.
I think he would. James is probably right that if he had a Troia Papagaio, which is for parrot Portuguese, we'll have to ask. We have at least one Brazilian listener. I'm sure she can tell us how bad that pronunciation
Troia
was.
Papagaio. I mean, I've said that in kind of like an Italian-American way there. I mean, if an Italian had a name like that, it's one of the most offensive.
Really?
Both words are very offensive.
What does it mean? Well,
Troy, Helen of Troy. So that is seen as a lady of the night, let's say.
Okay.
And then Pappagallo is like if you're like a parrot or a peacock, you are a show off. You are
right.
Yeah. So
that was the name of the Italian restaurant in Macclesfield. What, the Pappagallo? So, yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. I think if Martinez had a viable alternative, then the conversation is different. But James is probably right that he doesn't have. There's no one to take that place in the squad. I'm probably not as Ronaldo-philic as John would be, which is my own shortcoming as a Messi loyalist. But I think you can definitely make a case for him being in the squad. But I think you're both right that the big issue for Martinez is what do you do? Probably not even in the group stage, partly because he won't be playing in it because he's been suspended for 2 games now. But say you get to that first knockout round and you run into Norway or whatever, Norway or Uruguay, someone like that. You're playing probably the first really good team you will have faced. It's a straight knockout, one-shot game. Can you afford to play Cristiano Ronaldo for that moment when that might not be the right decision in the kind of round for the team for the whole performance? And I think that is where you get into the issue of Ronaldo being problematic for Portugal because, it makes no difference in qualifying. They beat Armenia 9-1 without him. So they will qualify for tournaments because they've got so many good players. The issue is what do you do when you get to the tournament? I've got to admit, I find it strange we're having this conversation because I was pretty sure I saw Ronaldo's last international game, which was the 6-1 against Switzerland in the last 16 in Qatar. When he didn't start, the player that James Horncastle has written off to nobody, Gonçalo Ramos, starts instead, scores a hat-trick within half an hour or something. And you think, right, well, that's kind of proven the point that Portugal are better without Cristiano Ronaldo. They'd been kind of inching towards the knockout stages before that. And then because the result is settled, because the game seems over, you get the whole crowd chanting Ronaldo as though they decided they wanted him to play as like a mascot, effectively. And that felt really damning to me. And I was like, well, that's it. Surely now he retires whenever Portugal get knocked out. He obviously didn't, moved to Saudi Arabia, rebuilt his career, built an entire football culture around him. So as much as we might think Portugal should retire him, it's become very clear that Cristiano Ronaldo is not going to retire himself. He shows no signs whatsoever of wanting to stop.
Yeah, I mean, if I show a bipolar side of my personality and become Zag now, I remember I did, I think, 3 of their games at the last Euros. And the first one was Portugal against Turkey in Dortmund. And Portugal won that 3-0, kind of in spite of Cristiano. I mean, he set up one of the goals, but he had a shocker. He had like an air shot. There was a header which prime Ronaldo would have buried. But India was in goal and had a shocker himself. So it felt like anyone who was capable of getting a shot on target for Portugal was going to score a goal. And he didn't. And instead, the story of the game wasn't really the scale of the Portugal win and doing it almost when they were playing with 10 rather than 11, because Ronaldo was just going through the motions. It was all of these pitch invaders that kept jumping the advertising hoardings to have selfies with Cristiano during the game. And I think by the fourth or fifth, he was so annoyed by this. A, because it was becoming a distraction. B, because it was getting in the way of him maybe scoring the goal that he hadn't scored. And then the other games I did were both 0-0s in the knockouts. And the first one was the Slovenia one, where he misses a penalty in normal time and breaks down in tears. And it's like, can he recover himself here? Which he does. Portugal then win the penalty shootout. And then the last one was, their last game at Euros, which was the quarterfinal against France in Hamburg, another 0-0. So you have both of these knockout games go to stoppage time and penalties. So the zag here is saying, like, when the going gets really tough and the competitive level goes up another level in knockout football, he's not doing what I said he's in the team to do. Which is score those goals. Do you know what I mean? This is the conundrum. And what I found, again, my final point on this will be how defensive Roberto Martinez was in the press conferences, because inevitably the first questions, not by the local Portuguese media, but by international media, would be like, how can you justify having this guy in the team? He's not scoring goals. You know, he looks like a passenger in some of these games. He's clearly not at the level. He's not fit enough. And Roberto was like, do you know how many minutes he played last year? 4,000 minutes in the Saudi Pro League and the Asian Champions League. You know, there's nothing wrong with his body. He can still do this. And it did feel that Martinez was very much in hock with the, Ronaldo will be my guy, regardless of what you think about him, regardless of what he scores, and regardless of whether you think that, some of Ronaldo's investments include media companies which own Portuguese newspapers.
Is this part of it that does it change it? Maybe I'm being too harsh. Does it change it, the fact that when things don't go Ronaldo's way, it does seem from the outside as though he is very much happy for it to look an awful lot like it's all about him? So he misses the penalty and breaks down in tears. Now, my son, actually, we had a game at the weekend, lost 4-1. He thought he should have had a penalty. It wasn't a penalty because he hadn't retreated the correct distance from the goal kick, so it would have been a free kick to them anyway. But he got very upset and started crying, and I had to once again tell him that unless you're in severe physical pain, you do not cry on a football pitch. I don't mind him crying anywhere else in life. I want to make that clear. I'm a very modern father. But you don't cry because you're losing a match or because you think you should have had a penalty. Cristiano Ronaldo kind of does. He kind of doesn't mind a little bit of I'm very upset about this. I just wonder whether the timbre of the discussion around this would change if Ronaldo wasn't quite so willing or eager to make it look an awful lot like kind of this whole thing is about him and him getting the ending he wants, rather than I think I'm the best player to be in the team, which he probably is, and he's certainly right. It's understandable that he thinks that given all he's achieved. But it doesn't seem healthy to me that everything that happens is now Cristiano Ronaldo's crying because he's missed a penalty.
Yeah, and I go back to my memories of him at Manchester United when he was, I suppose, at his peak as a United player, that when Edwin van der Sar saves the penalty from Manelka in the 2008 Champions League final, the players run to Edwin van der Sar. Ronaldo, who's missed a penalty in the shootout, collapses in tears of relief or celebration and is not with them. And I remember in the semi-finals of that game against Barcelona, against Messi, who actually probably wasn't fit to play, to play against that Barcelona team, which was pre-Pep, but it was still a good team, was you've got to work hard. And Ferguson just put Ronaldo far up front and just said, try and work hard if you can. And there were points where the crowd were getting at him because he wasn't working hard enough for the cause. And it has always been about him, but his ability so transcended that thing of having to work and put everything for the team that he was able to ride that out for a long, long time. And people forgave him, and United fans idolise him, and they still think he's the best player they've ever seen, and all that type of thing. Even when he had that second spell at United, which I think, in my opinion, rather, I suppose, scarred the myth. It was all about him. He could turn up. There was a hat-trick he scored against Spurs, which was just like, he's still absolutely amazing. But then the rest of the time, he wouldn't run a leg. The game at Brentford, which, the famous, where Ten Hag came under pressure, he's just shouting at the other players. And it's like, well, you could actually contribute this a bit yourself if you want, mate. It's about that. But
so the famous image of that, I think, is, and it must be like prime career Ronaldo, is there a goal that Nani takes off him? Nani taps it on the line. And
yeah, playing for Portugal, yes.
Playing for Portugal, and Ronaldo has a strop.
Yeah.
If there's any consolation to listeners who think this is just some sort of kind of anti-Ronaldo rage bait, it's not. Everything's in a flip in the second half. Don't worry about that. After we've given you our announcements from Egyptian Steel, Cristiano Ronaldo's favoured steel brand. That childish side to him has been present throughout his career.
Right.
It's kind of the price of doing business, isn't it? And it's the kind of, his motivation is as much the glory of the team, the glory of his talent, the glory of wanting to be the best that he can be. But it's also, there's a glory of Ronaldo that he's interested in. And I think that's probably fine. That feels like it might be what keeps him going. And that's certainly been my sense in the international context, has always been basically he won't retire until he's got the ending that he wants. And that is, it's mad, but it's quite admirable.
But there's always been that motivation, isn't there, where you hear players or talk to players of that early United time, and he turned up and he said, I want to be the best in the world. And they're just like, well, yeah, everyone says that, mate. But he actually did. And there's a clip, I think, of an MUTV clip of him being at one of these end of season dinners. And then the guy says, who's the best player in the world? And he's with Nani and Anderson. And they say, oh, well, Zinedine Zidane or whatever it would be at the time. And he just goes, me. And they're laughing, but he means it. He actually, he means it, and he wants to get there. And I suppose with any of these things, that ego can take people a long way if you actually have the ability to do it. So he's paired his own determination, and that results from his own background, coming from nothing and having to prove himself. He's from Madeira. He's from Portugal, going to Lisbon, a big city. His origin story, as I say, is it's not the easiest. It's not the easiest, and he's had to support a family. And, if you ever go to matches in big matches at a Portugal game at a tournament, there is a whole Ronaldo. They're taking over 2 or 3 executive boxes because he's an industry in himself, and it is all about him. And there is something to be admired in that. But sometimes, particularly in Dublin, particularly on those moments when he's chiding Nani, there is still the small boy that arrived in Manchester that held his mum's hand as he crossed the road, and wore that terrible jumper, had that Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine hairstyle. And he's still that little boy inside. And we all are that little boy inside, aren't we? But he is the most famous person in the world, he thinks, apart from Donald Trump.
No, I reckon Ronaldo's more famous than Trump.
He does as well.
Yeah, no, I think he is. I think he's objectively much. I think Cristiano Ronaldo might be the most famous person who's ever lived, and we should probably respect that. Let's end this section on that kind of perseverance, because I think it's admirable in many ways. It's incredibly impressive in a lot of ways. Is it also a little bit, do we think let's do a little bit of Todd psychology here. Is it a little bit rooted in fear of what comes after, of a life dedicated to football? What does that look like when the football leaves you, as Gary Neville says?
I think Carragher says that.
Was that Carragher?
Yeah. But by all means, attribute it to Gary Neville.
Do we think that he basically can't? It's difficult to separate, and we don't know him, obviously, so we're guessing. But do we think that he's doing it out of pure love for football? He just loves the activity. His body can still do it, so he's happy to do it. Is it self-glorification? Is it a little bit of kind of fear that when he wakes up and he's not a footballer anymore, what is Cristiano Ronaldo? This thing that he more than anybody else has dedicated his entire life to. He's built his entire personality around being Cristiano Ronaldo. You would be quite worried. It'd be a bit like if Wilson wasn't allowed to podcast. Do you know what I mean? It would be.
Luckily, he's on 7 today. So
yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, I think you alluded to it couple of minutes ago when you said he won't stop until he gets the ending he wants. But I don't know what that ending is, because having sat through the Piers Morgan interview, he doesn't seem interested in winning the World Cup, or he says at least like that, I won't let the tournament in the summer define me. You know, my legacy is already set, and it is. You know, I mean, whatever people might think, I think people often lose perspective and forget about this. Portugal is a nation of 11 million people. 11 million. Okay, it's actually tiny. I think we tend to equate it with Spain because it's on the end of Spain, and people go and play golf in the Algarve with, you know, Alan Shearer and Steven Gerrard, and it has a bigger place in our consciousness than it actually is. It's a small country, and him winning the Euros and those 2 Nations Leagues, including the one against Spain in the summer, you know, are massive achievements that I don't think he feels that he has anything left to do on the international stage. You know, one of the interesting asides in that Piers Morgan interview is, I think he's asked about Wayne Rooney, you know, thinking Ronaldo is a genius, but Messi is better. And Ronaldo says it doesn't bother him. But there's a moment where he says, how many World Cups had Argentina won before Messi? Oh, they'd already won it a couple of times, hadn't they? In 78 and in 86. Almost as like, he was like, why did it? Portugal never won anything until I showed up. And so it doesn't seem to me that he feels the need to win the World Cup in order to retire. And so what is driving him? And, you know, a lot of what comes across in that Piers Morgan interview is, I'm a billionaire now. I did that earlier than Bloomberg said I did. And
you don't tick her up in Riyadh.
And I'm more famous than Donald Trump. And then sort of Piers throws some names from the past at him, like, you know, the Queen, Princess Diana, Nelson Mandela. And you see Ronaldo going like, it's a good debate. Maybe that debate is what's keeping him going. You know, am I bigger than Nelson Mandela
is that the
when
best
he
way
did his
of,
long walk to freedom? Like,
is that the best way of illustrating where we have got to as a global culture? That when John Lennon said the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, that got them kind of cancelled in America, and now Cristiano Ronaldo can sit there saying, "Do you know what? I think I probably am. I'm probably bigger than Mandela, to be honest." And everyone's like, "But is Messi bigger than Mandela? Who's the biggest of the two?" While you think about that, we are, like Cristiano Ronaldo, going to take some messages from our commercial partners. Welcome back to episode 71 of Libero with me, Rory Smith, John Brewin, and James Horncastle, now restored to their full English nomenclature. There's been a couple of things, James, that you said that have really interested me about kind of the way that Ronaldo is. I think we're probably all guilty of it to an extent, but like the way Ronaldo is projected, his decision not to retire. You could also say all of those things, I think, about Lionel Messi, couldn't you? That, you know, shouldn't Argentina have moved beyond him? Is he stopping other people getting into the team? Why is he still there when he's playing in a farmers league in North America, etc.?
He never won anything for his country until he started playing with Lautaro Martinez up front.
Exactly. You know, is it all about Lautaro? Like Lautaro. The Lautaro fanboys are in the house. Why do you think it is that Ronaldo is subject to those sorts of criticisms and Messi isn't? And I would say that you can't use Messi winning the World Cup in 2022 as a reason, because it was happening before Messi did that.
So I think it's because Messi is almost like a silent footballer in that, even though he's been playing in Miami now for how long? 2-3 years, whatever. I haven't heard Messi speak English yet. He doesn't have to speak English in Miami. You know, I think the language in Miami, which is still the majority spoken, is Spanish, obviously, because it's. I remember during the Club World Cup, I went to a conference where the chief business officer, Javier Sensi for Inter Miami, was talking, and he said the great thing about Miami is that it's close to America. In that it's almost like a South American capital. But I think Messi clearly has a lot of things in common with Cristiano. Let's not forget Messi Incorporated, you know, how many sponsors that attracts, how willing he is to do the Visit Saudi stuff too, you know. But because he doesn't talk and he doesn't give interviews to Piers Morgan, it allows him to keep for being so famous as he is, a much lower profile to me than Cristiano has. And Cristiano's really willing to sort of lean into that and be a personality in a way that Messi isn't, a personality that speaks beyond his own football. And I mean, that's what struck me being in Miami during the Club World Cup was I went there expecting everyone to be fans of Messi. And instead, I just found a lot of Americans that I spoke to, at least anecdotally, associated more with Ronaldo. And, again, in Miami, you have to remember that not all the South Americans living in Miami are Argentine. They're from countries that are sick of seeing Messi's Argentina beat their country, So, but I think it comes back to language and Messi being so famous, but having a much lower profile than Cristiano.
What do we think Ronaldo stands for then as a cultural figure? Does Messi, I agree. I think Messi is a purely footballing figure, really. You can make a case that he's kind of athletic greatness or whatever, but basically he's a football thing in a way that Ronaldo is not. Ronaldo's fame outside football massively outstrips that of Messi, I would say. What are his brand values?
I think he's actually this almost like this sporting representation of this billionaire class that we have now. This idea, who wants to live forever? That to quote Freddie Mercury, but
he's the penis age guy.
He's a penis age guy, Brian Johnson. Yeah, he. I have no doubt that Cristiano Ronaldo knows his own penis age. Yeah,
that's the episode title right there.
Let's stop the podcast.
And this idea that, and one of the reasons that these players do not give up football because that's good for business, and they are businessmen. They are almost former footballers that moved into the world of business. There's corporations, these advertisers that they attract, and within Ronaldo Court, the succession planning is what do we do when he can't actually? What happens if he gets a double cruciate and can't actually play? Which one factor we should say is he's been quite lucky with injuries, as has Messi. Maybe more talented players than them never had that look, but it all feels very 2025, where the world, it appears, is ruled by people like Ronaldo that hold the keys to success. And also, there is a subculture of people that really admire that. He's a high performance taken to the nth degree. That's his whole thing, and the way that he lives, and the fact that Erling Haaland almost has to sort of say, actually, my high performance is not just a result of me being a highly talented footballer who, has the right genes and has had the right coaches. I also have to make these sacrifices that all people who are of this superhuman extraterrestrial class have to do. And he's changed the model there. Ronaldo and to a lesser extent Messi are not man of the people like someone like Diego Maradona was. They are celebrities. They are bigger than Hollywood. They are the thing to aspire to, and the world of social media and Instagram and all the rest of it. Of empty content, a lot of it is, isn't it?
Well, Ronaldo is, if you think about the cultural forms that go into the modern Cristiano Ronaldo, the current Cristiano Ronaldo, you've got he's got the turkey teeth, effectively, like his perfectly veneered teeth. He is like hydration, high performance, Whoop, the thing that measures what all that stuff about, that he owns a slice of that company that is similar to an Aura ring.
He doesn't seem to like balds, but he has his own set of hair transplant clinics where sort of players go to.
There is an Instagram like aesthetic to Cristiano Ronaldo. Like he's a man designed by Instagram effectively now. He's very high performance podcast. Can absolutely see him sort of just chewing the fat with Jake. About this, or even Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO.
Well, Steve Bartlett's a top red, so could happen.
Top red, Stephen Bartlett talking to bid CR7. There's the branding stuff. Yeah, he does feel he is a very kind of 2025 creature, and I've got to admit that I find that personally quite off-putting. Like, I don't like that. That annoys me. I would much rather a Maradona. And if you can't have a Maradona, maybe not as extreme as Maradona, but you want a kind of rounded human with flaws. And if you're not going to have that, I'd rather have someone who never says anything like Messi, to be perfectly honest. I find that much more engaging, that kind of mystique. And I would suggest that a lot of that stuff does detract the role that Ronaldo plays in the culture, which is inherently divisive, I think detracts from him as a player. I think it's made him much more divisive than it needs to be.
He was a brilliant footballer. That's the thing, that it's almost overshadowed by this nonsense, because the player at Manchester United was brilliant. The player at Real Madrid was even better, which a lot of Manchester United fans struggled. Oh, it was better when he played off the wings. Yeah, it was. It was amazing. It was an incredible sight to behold if you're there in the flesh. But some of the stuff with Real Madrid, the scoring feats are ridiculous. And weirdly enough, this is another thing that Ronaldo thinks. He feels underappreciated by Madrid, doesn't he? And there is an argument that he is as good a player for that club as Di Stefano. And he never quite had the moments. Remember the 2014 Champions League final? He scores, and I think it's like the fourth goal. And the celebration is the shirt off and all this, and that's where the cameras get their money shot. But actually, the players that won that game were Sergio Ramos and Gareth Bale. But because it was in Lisbon, it was this is Ronaldo's moment. Silly things like that, they're not silly, but he is taken away from, actually, mate, you're the reason that they are the best team in the world. Your goals. And the scoring feats. You know, we used to joke all these times about Pele and Romario's goals. Like, where did they score these goals? Ronaldo's have all come in top division football. You know, the Saudi League is not a poor standard. He has scored goals everywhere he's played.
I'm glad John has the esteem of the Dolmio.
I do. I always have done.
I think the only person to compare him with is, in terms of brand, is Brand Beckham now. Brand Beckham has got in the way of what an incredible player David Beckham was. You know, a lot of people have completely lost sight. I mean, if you watch some of the YouTube highlights of Beckham's career, even just like David Beckham crossing set to Europop, some of the passes are still, aside from some of Trent Alexander-Arnold, I've never, and some of Harry Kane, I've not seen an England player pass the ball like David Beckham since. And yet we're sort of, you know, mainly sort of these days consuming the Beckhams through their various different Netflix shows. Yeah, Beckham in Qatar, or Beckham with Inter Miami, Beckham the football owner.
Courtside at an NBA game or whatever with his kids. You know, that's the image that is projected around the world, but it isn't the little guy with the floppy hair that scored, you know, from a halfway line, or that began the Beckham story. It's post Beckham. It's Beckham at 50. It's, you know, the illustrated man that he is now, and also the weird thing that, like, his family, like the Brooklyns, you know, falling out with the family is bigger news than David Beckham as a footballer ever was, in a weird way.
So I think that's right, James. That Ronaldo and Beckham are the two most kind of heavily branded footballers. They're probably in a class of their own. Don't know which one you'd say is greater, but Ronaldo's a billionaire, so maybe him. But if you think about someone like Zlatan, he also, who I recently watched in the film Asterix and Obelix in the Middle Kingdom, which is not, I thought it was quite good. Apparently it was a massive flop in France, but I quite enjoyed it. And I thought Zlatan was very good. He played his role with a sort of knowing humour. But Zlatan also kind of got eaten up by his brand, didn't he? He became this kind of caricature of himself almost, which seemed to sort of fan the flames of debate around him, because it wasn't just kind of, is Zlatan one of the best strikers in the world? You know, he objectively was one of the best strikers in the world for an awfully long time. He's one of the most successful players who's ever lived. But it was, is Zlatan as good as he says he is? Which is a much more kind of pernicious debate. And obviously, no, he wasn't as good as he said he was, because the person he said he was Michael Jordan in Space Jam. Do you know what I mean? It was this obvious cartoon that I think was not meant to be taken literally. But I think it did some damage. I'm certain it helped Zlatan's brand and helped with his post-career kind of businesses and all that stuff. I'm sure it made him money, and that's legitimate and that's fine. But I do wonder if it obscured to an extent the player that he was. I think that's absolutely true of Beckham, that Beckham became a celebrity first and a footballer second. And ultimately the power of celebrity is much greater. It's a much bigger audience you're speaking to. So the player that Beckham was got lost a little bit, because he was a transformational player. I think David Beckham, in an English sense, reinvented crossing, which is amazing. Players didn't used to cross the ball like that before David Beckham. And I do wonder whether it's the same with Ronaldo, that we see brand Ronaldo, we judge brand Ronaldo more than we see Ronaldo the footballer, which strikes me as being a terrible shame.
I was watching one of these YouTube kind of podcasts that ex-players put out in Italy. There's one with Antonio Cassano, who's a man whose takes are hotter than some bombette in Puglia where he's from. He was there with Daniele Adani and Nicola Ventola. And they had Buffon. They had Buffon come on as a guest. This is like a week or so ago. And Cassano, he like hates Max Allegri. He seems to not like Ronaldo. He named his son Lionel after Messi. So he's very much committed in that sense. And he was like, this guy, he didn't call him a tap-in merchant, which again is one of the things that was the meme around Ronaldo, tap-in Ronaldo. But Buffon basically had to keep stepping in and saying like, okay, look, when I played with Cristiano, he was in his mid-30s. And, he did evolve his game into being, I'm a finisher now. There's no point me trying to beat you 1v1 when I've lost a yard of pace or something like that. I don't have that in my bag of tricks anymore. I just have to be more alive in the penalty area than the defenders I'm coming up against and more athletic when it comes. I think one of you mentioned earlier a header that Ronaldo scored. One of his best goals in Italy is like Air Ronaldo. It's him just like 7 foot in the air, out jumping a Sampdoria defender, which it's not a spectacular goal. It's more a feat of athleticism where you're like, wow, okay, how's he got that high? And so I think we're at this stage in Ronaldo's career where it's less spectacular. But in his view, it's like, look at my numbers. Look at my numbers. They are still extraordinary. Sort of give me the respect I'm due.
But there must be a point of him where he realizes that, like you say, like if he's lost a yard of pace and he doesn't have the tricks anymore, at what point does he hit the wall where he thinks, that I don't have enough of what I was to continue to be?
But I mean, Buffon listened to that and sort of then was like, in training, Antonio, like if you see how quick Cristiano's reactions are doing certain drills, you can still see he's different. He's still on another level. A lot of the basics that people just take for granted, but he makes look very simple. They're not spectacular. There are no frills about them. He's like, this guy is still different. And I think we lose sight of those fundamentals being still what they are, extraordinary. And, like now we're just kind of, I think a lot of people have been desensitized to Ronaldo's goals because there's just so many of them that when he scores, it's like, Ronaldo scored, whatever. Which, sort of hasn't really helped him as he gets sort of longer in the tooth. Him claiming the other day that it's harder to score in Saudi than it is in Spain. And lots of little things like that, which obviously there's a large degree of self-interest in that. Even though he says, look at all the players that are in Saudi, and he hasn't won the league in Saudi. He's been there 3.5 years.
Failure.
Al Ittihad and Al Hilal just keep doing him. Sort of even Al Ahly won the Asian Champions League. It's just like anybody but Al Nassr.
But I mean, does that not mean we should be asking the question like, have Al Nassr outgrown Cristiano Ronaldo?
Well, so yeah, clearly it's a very hard league to win. Again, like one of the stories which Ronaldo in that Piers Morgan interview, Piers is very clear. Piers is sort of really saying, you're a normal guy, you're so humble and all this sort of thing. And Ronaldo's like, yes, I'm a normal guy, I'm really humble, but I'm also perfect. But one of the things that came out was the guy he started out with in the sporting academy. And, they'd go to McDonald's and beg the woman behind the counter for burgers. He's now the CEO of Al Nassr. Charlton Athletic and Sheffield Wednesday legend Jose Semedo is now the Al Nassr CEO.
But that's presumably just because he was the best qualified person for the job. John, where you saw Ronaldo live in the flesh as a teenage phenom. How do you square your memories of him and what he made you feel with what he's become?
I remember actually, I went to the Bolton game, the famous it always comes up on YouTube. I was there and he came on and just took apart the Bolton team of that time. And just poor old Nicky Hunt was twisted into several different shapes. I remember chatting to a friend at work on the Monday and she said, oh, what did you get up to at the weekend? I said, I fell in love at the weekend. She's like, what? And I said, oh yeah, with a Portuguese winger name. She's like, you sad bastard. You know?
Yeah, but it's better than you phrase it. It's better than you phrased it like that than with a young Portuguese boy. That might have been.
That's allowed. That's allowed in Manchester, you know. And but yeah,
depends what age he was, I think.
Yeah, well. Anyway, but so, and then another thing was that a chap I used to work with, another friend, used to call him Comedy Ronaldo because he just said, oh, he does all those silly little flicks and all this type of thing. But then I remember going to a game at Fulham when Fulham used to play at Loftus Road, and he just utterly destroyed them. But unfortunately, up front for United that day was Diego Forlan, who missed an absolute hatful. And it was, you watching this wonder boy take shape, and it was around the same time that Rooney came on the scene. And then it was almost from the start of 2006, and he had a great World Cup. And suddenly it's like, actually, this guy is going to be brilliant. He's too good to United to hold on to. Real Madrid start circling and all the rest. And it's interesting that you made a Beckham comparison before. It's funny, isn't it, the way that these two billionaire footballers are both that had Alex Ferguson as the father figure and have rebelled against this idea that Fergie would have was like, you marry young, you live a humble life and you do what I say. And both of them essentially, in slightly different ways, rebelled against him, kowtowed to him for a certain point and then broke away and became this. But they needed his grounding to get there.
Yeah, but also that sense of that Fergie has created the two greatest monsters that he could have imagined, that he was kind of trying to keep them. He saw the talent and wanted them to dedicate their lives to their talent. And I suppose actually, in fairness to both, they did. They both have got every last drop out of their talent. It's just that they've also built billion-dollar business empires that I presume he doesn't approve of.
And also feel completely independent of Man United.
Yes, of course. Like when Beckham started having success with England, and obviously, you know, with his wife, that, you know, Ferguson, you know, that silly girl. Suddenly, it's out of Ferguson's control, isn't it? And eventually, Ronaldo fell out of his control. Both of them now have good relations with him and see him as such a founder of their success. But there was a certain bad blood from, you know, people like Roy Keane that was even closer than him. But the Ferguson did help them on their way. And when Ronaldo came back to United, it was a call to Fergie that got the deal done.
That's amazing counterfactual though, John, isn't it? That he was supposed to be going to City, which, like, I feel like, again, we've had in the last few years, like, things that really challenge what we think about Pep. You know, sort of most recently signing the goalkeeper who everyone says can't do anything with the ball at his feet, or signing Haaland, who is just a goal scorer. And yet Ronaldo was supposedly City bound.
But do we think that's true? Do we think that Ronaldo was going to sign for City thing is true, or do we think that it was that City were kind of
willing patsies in a Mendes master plan?
Yeah, like, can we really see Cristiano Ronaldo like lining up in a Guardiola? I just find it really hard to imagine.
But for the same reason that a lot of people found it hard to imagine Donnarumma playing for a Man City with Pep, I can see him signing Cristiano for similar reasons. Like, we play in the final third, we're ball dominant, we've got creators, all we need is just put the ball in the box, those cutbacks, boom, he'll lap it up. And it was interesting to me that he seemed to be willing to go there until United, basically, until the Ferguson call came in.
Yeah, until Ferguson got in touch. That would have been an extraordinary thing to see Cristiano Ronaldo in sky blue at the Etihad.
Because again, in the Morgan interview, he says, look, I could still do it in the Premier League now. If I was playing in a top team, which clearly is saying that Man United in his second spell were not a top team. If I were in a top team, I would be scoring 25 goals a year in the Premier League. You know, Cristiano Ronaldo, age 40. It would have been interesting to put him in that City team. Whether was that before they signed Haaland? It must have been.
I think they wanted Harry Kane, couldn't get Harry Kane. Pep wanted a finisher. It came towards the end of the transfer market and this deal was available. It was one of those, you know, the spare money around, and it was the sort of post-COVID, and it all seemed to fit into place. And then suddenly he ends up at United, and City looked like they pulled off a master plan because Ronaldo being around, just Ole Gunnar Solskjaer couldn't deal with it, neither could Ranić, and Ten Hag struggled with it until he eventually got rid of him. It was a disaster, really.
But there's no way that just to kind of clear up that conspiracy theory, there's no way that City did it to destroy Manchester United.
But they also, if you think about it, like, Sheikh Mansour and City, it's a reflection of the Tevez, welcome to Manchester.
Yeah.
You've got an asset that United want, and for them, it's a political move. It's about, look, we've got something United haven't got, apart from all the titles and cups that we're winning that they don't win.
The best manager in the world.
All that stuff that they can't have. And that is important to them as a club.
And I think City do have a little bit of a streak of we'd quite like a major star. I can believe that City have that in them, that there would be branding opportunities that come with Cristiano Ronaldo that you don't get with any other player. And, we mentioned Haaland's foray into YouTubing at the start. And it's interesting that he's gone down that route, because I think he recognises that if you want to speak to as broad an audience as possible, one that will stay with you after your playing career is over, and Erling Haaland obviously still has 15 years as a top-level player probably, you have to go and meet them where they are. They're not all in football. And that is what Ronaldo has done maybe more effectively than anyone since Beckham. Just to finish, if we look forward 5, 10, 20 years in the future and Cristiano Ronaldo has actually retired, after his 19th World Cup, what do we think his legacy will be? Is it the kind of Beckham paradigm where he is just a sort of broader cultural figure rather than a former footballer? It's just one thing he used to do in a portfolio career. Or do we think that he is primarily remembered as a player? Not least because, English, the Premier League is in English, football's sort of lingua franca is English, even when we convert our names to Portuguese. Beckham is English. That will have helped Beckham. It will have helped him in the US. It will have helped him in various territories that he is English. Just that's his first language. Ronaldo's English is absolutely extraordinary. Obviously, he's an incredibly smart man. Does that make a difference? Will he be remembered as a player, or will he be remembered as something else?
I suppose you've got to look at the record books and say he won 5 Ballon d'Or. He had scored the most goals. He's got, you'd look at him and he's a historic figure in football. And I suppose the thing is, beyond football, he might be that as well. In Portuguese society, he definitely is a historic figure. He's the most famous Portuguese person, possibly, since Henry the Navigator or whatever. He's a historic figure. He really is. And that's got to be his legacy. It's just, at the moment, we don't know when he plans to step into history.
I think he'll still be in our lives in a way that Messi won't be. I think Messi will quite happily fade into the background, go back to Barcelona, go back to Rosario, and live a kind of quiet life, unless some Barcelona presidential candidate one day basically says, Lionel, I want you to be part of my executive team. We'll name a stand at the Camp Nou, the new Camp Nou, the Camp Nou after you. Whereas I think Cristiano will be more present for all of the reasons that we've laid out. I think this World Cup in North America, given his absence from North America for so long, is going to be big for him, in terms of it being almost his gateway, into America, given how at that recent G7 summit, there's a guy, Portuguese head of the European Council, gives Donald Trump a signed Ronaldo shirt. I think there's, bizarrely, it seems extraordinary to me that the most famous person in the world he's clearly tapped the American market, but he hasn't been physically in America. And I think
for reasons that we should say he denies.
For reason
just to be clear,
reason he denies, case brought against him, which was dismissed, I think, a couple of years ago. But he is, he's going to this World Cup. Maybe what I was saying is that market clearly not been untapped by him. There's still probably potential there for him, which, given it's still, as much as Saudi are building their own big sport, media, and entertainment market, the number one media, sport, and entertainment market in the world is still the USA. So I think there's still more to come from Cristiano.
This is just the brand building beginning. Thanks to James. Thanks to John. Thank you to producer Tom. Obrigado a todos. I think that's right. It's todo Spanish. I don't know. We'll see you later in the week when Miguel, Jack, and Wilson will be discussing the North London Derby. Thank you very much for listening. Boa noite.